this is Michael Dean from the Freedom Fiends radio show. I've run websites since 1996 and have used over a dozen web hosts in that time. AgoristHosting.com is the only one that hasn't broken my heart. Agorist Hosting's uptime and service is stellar, and their DDoS mitigation is the best I've seen. That's important because if you tell the truth in this world, you'll ruffle feathers. No matter what the haters hit us with, Agorist Hosting keeps our websites online. If you have a mission-critical commercial presence or a world-changing activism site, go with AgoristHosting.com.
And there are lots of stories about, apparently he liked to whip out his Johnson in various contexts, stories of him peeing on the White House grounds, just like, there goes the president peeing in the bushes again.
It is slavery, it's just a different name. A lot of people don't realize what it is, and when we bring these ideas to light and make people realize, that this government force is the problem.
And to me, it's like, I say, imagine you're an abolitionist in the 19th century, and these slave masters are giving you the same exact argument. Who's going to pick the cotton?
Hey, Seeds of Liberty, read the show's description, please. Fervently complete the course, report him to the infantry. Finish him, deconstruct the fallacy. Seasonal production means it seems to spawn a tragedy. Peep the action, please, a fraction of the allegory. Corollary cadences, complaining on a sadder story. Menial, recently reading into the thesis here. Mirroring the people who completely fail to see it though. Seeing is believing, yes, the reason is appealing most. Reading enemies is just enables you to see it too. Menial, recently reading into the thesis here. Mirroring the people.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Seeds of Liberty podcast. This is episode 74. As always, the Seeds of Liberty podcast is covered by the BIPCOT no government license. This allows reuse by anyone except governments and the agents thereof. You can find out more information about this at bipcot.org. So this week, we are joined by, well, I guess it's just CJ right now, right? I heard you're trying to drop the prof thing.
Well, I dropped it out of the official title of the show. I mean, I'm not, bothered if people still call me that, but yeah, I mean,
Well, no, I just, because I noticed the last couple of shows I listened to, you introduced yourself as just CJ, so hey man, whatever you want, whatever you feel more comfortable with being called, I'm fine with that. But. Yeah,
no, just plain CJ is fine. I dropped it because I didn't want to give people the impression that I was trying to make an argument from authority. I initially started using that as just sort of like a little, online handle nickname from some different discussion boards and things, and sometimes I got the impression that some people thought I was like trying to be, high and mighty, like, oh, I know everything because I'm technically a professor,
Oh.
So, yeah.
No,
How dare you question the professor?
Yeah, well, which is not at all the point I was trying to make.
Of course. Well, that makes sense. Well, for anybody who doesn't know, we have had him on before, and if you don't know, you really should know. This is CJ from the Dangerous History podcast, which is one of my favorite podcasts to listen to. And I think everybody else should be listening to it too.
For me too.
It's definitely. I guess for me, actually, now it's even more because now I've got to hang out with you a little bit and meet you in person twice now. So now it's even like, yeah, this is definitely my favorite. Like I got into the history podcast with Dan Carlin, like most people did, but then when I found out about your podcast, which was well before I even got to the Fiends. Right away, I was just like, I love this guy. I love I just you do like everybody talks about how Carlin he's an amazing he's a really good storyteller. Carlin, I think, what he may lack in actual knowledge, because he always likes to point out that I'm not a historian, not a historian, not a historian. Mm-hmm. I'm just a big fan, mostly of war history, but just a big fan, But him and his team put a lot of work in. But he was obviously a radio guy in the past, so he has that. He has the cadence down and everything. He has the pauses. Like he's a wonderful storyteller. But there was just something about your show that like the first time I heard it, I don't know why, but maybe it's just your voice is kind of calming when you speak, and it was just like it was great, man. And I was like hooked from day one. The first time I found
he's a teacher,
Well, yeah, but I've had plenty of teachers.
But a lot of them suck.
Well, yes, exactly. And I've had my share of Charlie Brown teachers in the past where it's just just droning on, But
also a lot of teachers are a lot of teachers are trained hypnotists without really knowing it, or they can start talking, and before you know it, you're on their wavelength, and you're just sitting there listening along, nodding your head. And I find myself, I'll listen to CJ's stuff, and I can follow the whole thing. It's like opening my mind up for a information trance. I don't know what to say. It's very soothing, very informational, and very just full. When you get done listening to one of CJ's episodes, you're like, I got a lot of stuff I got to think about now, because I thought history worked that way.
Yeah, I've the first few times I had listeners tell me that things like my voice was calming and they like to listen to me when they're getting ready for sleep, I wasn't sure how to take that. I was kind of like, oh great, I'm that boring, I'm putting you to sleep, whatever. And then they kind of sort of realized what they were saying. And I actually had one listener, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, email into me and said he called me Anarchy's smooth operator. And I thought that was pretty badass, and I went and looked up that, you remember that cheesy 80s song, Smooth Operator?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I went and found that on YouTube, and I tweeted it out, and I was like, hey, this is my new, theme song that everybody's got my entourage has to follow me around with a boombox playing this everywhere I go. Yes. It's way better than Hail to the Chief.
Yeah, you know what? I was never a huge fan of that song, but I would definitely have to agree it's much better than that one.
Yeah.
That's what. Yeah, I remember you had said that. That's but it's true though, man. And it's funny that you said that you thought that they were originally saying that you were putting them to sleep, because I've actually run into that in the past before, where I was a huge fan of. Do you remember Bob Ross, the Joy of Painting guy?
Mm-hmm.
Who did the Happy Little Trees? Somebody was like, a while ago, a bunch of people were talking about him and all going, oh, he was such a great guy, talking all nice and lovey about him and stuff. And I was just like, without even thinking, I'm like, oh man, I was such a huge fan of his. Like, he was I used to put him on at night and I'd fall asleep to him, and everybody was like, gave me the death stares. Like, I'm like, no, I'm not saying he was boring. I'm like, no, his voice, it was the most soothing thing in the world. Like, I could just, if I couldn't sleep, I had like four or five episodes of his on a VHS tape, like, because that's how long ago this was, and that would be be my cure. Like, I would just, because if I wanted to watch the show to actually learn to try to paint like him, I would, but just wasn't paying attention. I would just have his voice. With yours, I don't think I could do that though, because I'm actually actively learning the entire time. Like, you bring out stuff. We were talking a little bit beforehand how you have this habit of finding like these obscure books that academic books that most people have never heard of. And so the information you bring to the table is almost always new to me. Even stuff that I think I know pretty well, I still find myself learning. So you have a soothing voice, but I'm so riveted that I don't think I could possibly fall asleep.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's what I'm shooting for.
Well, at least in my humble opinion, you have definitely hit the mark. But actually, you've exceeded the mark. So kudos.
Well, and I think the brilliant thing I did was I saw a complete black hole in the market. There was no such thing, and I don't think there really is even now, other than my show. There is no other anarchist history podcast. There are anarchist podcasts that talk about history sometimes, but there's not any other dedicated history podcast from an anarchist perspective.
Yeah, the closest one I could think of is, because I don't think he's come out as an anarchist, although he seems really close, is Daniele Bolelli. He seems to be getting closer and closer to that end, but yeah, he's definitely. You are the only. I've searched high and low because, like I said, once I found Carl, I need to learn more. I couldn't find an anarchist one until I heard of you. So.
Yeah, I was so excited after I listened to the first episode of CJ's podcast, because that's the first thing I'm gonna go do when I hear of a new podcast, and I was like, I'm in. Wow, I've been looking for this because I'm a history fanatic. I love to read and learn. I'm like a sponge. And this speech he gave the other day at Midway's Peace and Liberty Conference, I listened to it, it got me up in the gyms, man. It got me fired up.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was a pretty cool experience. It was a really, really positive crowd. Like they were really into it, and that makes all the difference in the world. Anytime you're talking to anybody, you know, whether you're a speaker, a musician, a stand-up comedian, anything where you're like performing in front of a group of people, you know, to have a positive crowd that's really on your side, just, you know, really kind of makes a world of difference. So. It was a cool thing to talk about too. It was one of the organizers of the event suggested the topic. I don't remember which one, but
well, yeah, I don't know. I think Joe Allen was doing a lot of the work with that. Maybe it was Joe who gave you that idea. But regardless, before we bury the lead too much, for anybody who hasn't, I am going to put a link to this in the show notes. But your talk was about abolitionism and anarchism, correct?
Yeah, looking back at the original, you know, anti-slavery abolitionists before the Civil War, and showing how there were kind of different groups of them on a spectrum, from sort of moderate anti-slavery people who were like, yeah, slavery's wrong and we should try to not maybe spread it too many new places, but, you know, what else are you going to really do today? And then you had the abolitionists who were for abolishing slavery, but they really wanted to try and do it through the political process, and they were much more interested in playing party politics. And then there were like the hardcore, not only is slavery wrong and we should try to get rid of it as soon as is feasible, but there was a group of people who were full-blown anarchists, abolitionists. You know, and a lot of people in our kind of circles, they know about Lysander Spooner and how he was an anarchist and also an abolitionist, but there was actually a whole group called the New England Non-Resistant Society, I think was the name. And they just took the argument against slavery and extended it to its logical conclusions. You know, they said, well, if it's wrong for one man to own and rule and control another man, then yeah, the chattel slavery of Africans is wrong. It needs to stop. But then so does earthly government, so does the state, because that's just another kind of version of the rule of some men by other men. So it was really interesting to learn about them.
I was talking about that one episode. It was a subtle observation that, you know, all the people who owned slaves who also paid taxes, it was like a double slavery. It's a double level of slavery. Like, the slaves had slaves, essentially.
Yeah. It's a whole, you know, it's just different versions of the same idea layered on top of each other. And these radical abolitionists, their point of view was that slavery was just like the most extreme and obvious version of the rule of some men by other men, but that it was kind of symptomatic of the rest of the American system, that it was just, you know, the U.S. government itself was just a more subtle, not as obvious version of the same thing. So, you know, the moderate abolitionists saw it as mostly the American system, the American government, the American Constitution is pretty sound and pretty good. There's just this one aberration called slavery that sucks and we need to get rid of it. But the real radicals thought, no, chattel slavery is just the most extreme and obvious manifestation of this thing that can be found throughout the rest of American society and the American government of domination and of some men ruling others. And by the way, these radical abolitionists, they were mostly very religious. And so they were basically early Christian anarchists, even though they wouldn't have called themselves that. But actually, Leo Tolstoy later explicitly recognized that they were Christian anarchists and said, yeah, these guys are Christian anarchists. And he knew because he was one.
Yeah, I was going to say, Tolstoy considered himself a Christian anarchist, correct? That's what, at least as far as I know.
Yeah, and there were, you know, amongst the folks there at the fest in Michigan, there were plenty of Christian anarchists, and they seemed to be very receptive to all that stuff.
Yeah, well, it's especially for them, at least the few Christian anarchists that I've gotten to know over the past couple of years, they're always excited to get information like that makes them feel better, because they're often maligned in the movement. Unfortunately, a lot of people are down on them. That, you know, they attack them. Oh, you can't, you know, the insane no true Scotsman anarchist who run around screaming, you can't be an anarchist and be religious at the same time. And I consider myself an atheist, but I don't, you know, I have made friends with some of these people. And I remember Tom Woods did an episode on this where he tried to make the case for Christian anarchism being completely legitimate, and they are compatible. They're not, the way other people would say they're not. And despite me still disagreeing with him at the end on a couple of points, I was still like, that's the best argument I've heard for this. So you know what? Yeah, whatever, man. You guys could be. I don't care. You want to help end the state with me? Great. We're friends. That's all I care about.
As long as it's voluntary.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, you're not pushing it on me. Okay, great. You can be an anarchist. That makes perfect sense to me. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'd rather have people around me who are whatever religion, but who at the end of the day believe in human freedom. I'll take that any day over an atheist who's a hardcore statist. Because which one is
they're
threatening
still not an
me?
atheist, though.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, those are who we call stateists, because they erroneously believe that they have given up the belief in a god only to take a belief in another god. So yeah, doesn't work that way, guys.
Yeah. I mean, I just in general I don't like just interacting with people who are overly pushy of whatever it is, even where it's kind of clear that you've said, okay, no thanks, So whether they're pushing religion or pushing atheism or pushing some other ideology, I mean, pushing it when you've kind of made it clear, like I'm not interested. Okay, have a nice day. Those aren't people I want to be around. I mean, I'm the same. I don't go giving unsolicited advice on political philosophy to people who clearly aren't interested. I mean. Not only is it kind of, at a certain level, being sort of a dick, probably not the most productive thing in most cases to push on someone who's not interested, because if anything, you'll just make them double their confirmation bias and their opposition to what you're saying if they're, if you're pushing unsolicited advice, I guess.
Oh, sure. That's
Backfire Effect.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That's when the Backfire Effect
there you go.
So, well, that's good. We're all in agreement about that. But, yeah, like I was saying, we got into that. I was saying that's why I can understand why the Christian anarchists were so enthused by it.
Well, maybe we should talk about like how to circumvent triggering that Backfire Effect for anybody that's listening, because I've found, you've got to appeal to emotions first before you start hitting people with logic, because they believe their logic is sound behind their beliefs. And when you say that their logic isn't sound, they're going to get, upset about it. So you have to go for the emotions first, then give them the logic. I've been trying that approach a lot more lately.
Yeah, I mean, my approach usually for most people is almost kind of like a very friendly version of guerrilla warfare, I guess. Assuming they're open to anything at all, and assuming they're someone that I even care enough about to try and open up their eyes to seeing things a different way.
Yeah.
And I tailor it to the person. People from different backgrounds and different experiences are going to be more receptive to different aspects of the liberty anti-state message. I mean, someone who comes from a very kind of right-wing background, you're going to find your opening that works with them is going to not work with someone from a very left-wing sort of a background. It's not the same. It's not one size fits all when it comes to that stuff. You got to know your audience.
Sure. I don't take that advice as often as I give it. I probably should. Although I've talked about this a lot recently, where I've just been stepping away from talking to people at all. Although I have found myself embroiled in like a 3-day conversation with a couple of cop apologists. Although I'm just having fun mostly.
Yeah.
But I say it all the time. I just don't follow it myself. It's great. I'm a great teacher in a lot of ways. Horrible student. But I've said for the longest time, I truly believe that just about everybody out there has that aha moment in them. It's just a matter of finding the right message, to the right way to deliver the message to them.
You have to find out why they. I've recently been trying this technique of making them see what they hate about government and what I hate about government coincides, and then just the logical breakdown of how I got to anarchism after that. And it's just you just walk them through it like baby steps. And instead of it being like you should be an anarchist and walking away, it's more like, hey, here, think about these things, like these things should bother you, emotionally. You should wonder why things are so fucked up.
Yeah, one approach I try to take, and part of it's personality. I mean, different people are going to be different ways. Some people naturally incline more towards, trolling, for lack of a better term. It's just not my personality to do that sort of thing, and I don't condemn people who are that way, but it's just not my bag. But the other thing that I think is something that many people, and I've been guilty of this earlier in kind of my development, my intellectual development, people try to push instead of pull. And the thing is, and this very often happens to both anarchists and atheists when they're recently converted to being either an anarchist or an atheist, is very often there's a lot of anger.
Yep.
And that manifests itself in you being a dick, and I include myself in that. I think I'm past it now. I think oftentimes people kind of move past it and sort of mellow out a little bit, but I can see how for a lot of people on the receiving end of that, it's just not really attractive if somebody's like really angry and depressed and whatever all the time, and they're like, oh yeah, come join my intellectual circle. Doesn't seem too appealing, but if you're someone who's generally more positive and upbeat and friendly and that sort of thing, and then you're like, oh yeah, I'm an anarchist, or however you want to put it, abolitionist or whatever, then people are more like, wow, you don't fit the stereotype I had in my head of the angry person dressed in black throwing bombs at a WTO meeting or something. Right? So I think that can be very disarming when I've, told some of the people I work with, and I don't push it on them, but they ask me, who are you voting for, whatever. I don't vote. And then why? And I've had even students, I tell my classes that I don't vote. And I don't get into the details of all of my belief system, but I do tell them usually at the beginning of the semester, listen, whatever else you can think about me, I don't have an ulterior motive here. I'm not trying to influence what party you support or don't support. I'm not trying to influence who you vote for or don't vote for. I personally don't. And it's amazing how often that part of my pep talk really, at least a few of the students in every class will be like really taken aback by that. They've never had a teacher say proudly, I don't vote. And, that I don't vote not because I'm lazy and don't feel like going out there on election day, but as a deliberate choice. And that kind of takes them aback. And it's amazing how often they'll then come by my office to ask about that, like, why don't you vote or whatever? And then, that's what I see as more of like pull rather than push. I'm not pushing it on them, believe these things and, whatever, but just sort of throwing out there things that catch them off guard, and then they're kind of like, whoa, what's going on here? There's something more to this than meets the eye.
Well, sure. That makes sense. Like you said, when you disarm somebody like that, it makes it so much easier to reach them, even if you're not trying, even if you're just trying to like essentially open a door and be like, hey, here's this door here. I'm just going to leave it open and I'm going to go over here now. So I'll catch up with you later. And then you the people that have a more curious mindset to begin with will automatically be like, well, now I need to go see what's behind that door. What's in there? Yeah. And that's great though. Like, oh yeah. Now, obviously, if the students come to you and ask you these questions, I'm sure you sit and talk to them. But like, they have you had any that have like pushed further past that and wanted to ask you more questions and tried to get inside your mind about that too as well, or do they kind of just get your explanation for voting and then go, oh, okay, and then leave it at that?
Very often a student who goes that far to come ask me about voting very often will be a student who will come back by my office repeatedly over the course of the semester with many different questions.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Once you get someone questioning, then it's over, I've noticed.
Yeah, and it might take them a long time. It might be a roundabout path. It's a long roundabout path for most people. But, yeah, if you could just get people to start really thinking for themselves and really questioning all the things that are taken for granted around them, I think more often than not, in the long term, they'll end up on what we would consider the right path, at least.
I totally agree, 100%.
And sometimes, by the way, appropriate considering we're on Seeds of Liberty podcast, sometimes I've thought of this approach almost sort of like as guerrilla gardening. Where you just throw in a few seeds in the park and then come back later and maybe some of them will take, maybe some of them won't. But you're doing something.
One of my favorite quotes these days is, "We know not what forest the seeds we plant today will bring." So yeah. I kind of live by that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's funny. I like that though. Because obviously we talk about planting seeds here all the time, but I like the guerrilla gardening angle because that's something I've promoted for a long time in regards to cannabis, among other things, but also just in general. I came across a couple of people that were doing guerrilla gardening in urban areas with fruit and vegetables. Just tossing stuff in front of the apartment buildings and stuff, the few little patches of grass that were there, and then all of a sudden all these plants were going, and people in the neighborhood had free food, which of course the government did not like at all. They had to try to shut that down right away. But I was like, that's brilliant. I love that idea, and it's so because people always talk about, oh well, it's so much easier to get go buy the food at the store. Well, yeah, it might be a little easier, but some of this stuff it really doesn't take a lot of effort. So pretty much. With a little bit of room and a minimal amount of effort, almost anybody can grow some of their own food. There's the people there's the people here in Manhattan and other cities too, obviously, that do the urban gardening where they have everything stacked upwards. So they build upward.
That's how I view these podcasts. That's exactly how I view this, as us walking up and dropping handfuls of seeds out on ripe land. Somebody might click on this stuff 5 years from now. We even had that conspiracy that an alien species might decipher one of our podcasts, take the message back to his home planet, and boom, there's a voluntarist planet. So you never know what actions you take. Just due to the chaos theory alone, what actions you take will cause what.
Well, yeah. Well, that is why we started this whole idea, and that's why plenty of people do. Obviously, CJ, your podcast is a little more dedicated to a specific aspect, which is more than needed. But, that's why we just decided to get out. Yeah, if people listen, it'd be great. And it's just an idea, but and the whole mentality of planting seeds, or now guerrilla gardening, I think I'm going to steal that one, and I'm going to use that one from now on. I really like that. But it really is, because that's what I try to do with a lot of people. It's almost like hit and run, where it's just... run into you, talk to you for a little bit, leave a little bit of information, and then just walk away. I do get into these drawn-out conversations online, but that's usually because it ends up attracting other people who then contact me and ask me questions. So it's worth it for me in that regard.
Yeah.
But in person, I've just started recently coming out more as far as my views go to my clients. Not all of them, but the ones that have been with me for a long time that I've gotten to know over the years, and we talk about things regularly anyway. I used to just kind of deflect questions away from that for the first couple of years, because I was like, do I really want to start this with some people that, especially that are hardcore statists, and
am I going to be able to handle their irrationality?
Well, number one, can I handle that? But also, I didn't want to, I wasn't in a position where I could really afford to lose too many clients. I do all right here, but I do have 2 little kids to take care of, so I need the money, man. So I really had to, it was tough for me at first. You also mentioned the anger that people go through. We've talked about this numerous times on the show. I was one of the worst. I went through a rage for the first year, and it wasn't until I finally realized that I was mad at myself that I slowed down and was I stopped for a little bit and took a step back and was like, oh, Jesus Christmas, I just wasted a year of my life and pissed off a whole bunch of people because I was angry at myself, but I was directing it outward instead. But the idea of just now getting past
I wrote an article on this.
What's that?
I wrote an article on it. I called it escaped cult. I called it escaped cult syndrome. And it happens whenever you leave a cult, man. You feel abandoned, you feel angry, confused, like your whole life's a lie. You're depressed, you don't want to trust anybody, and you want to lash out, man. It's a healing process you got to go through.
Yeah,
and I see
and
so many people get in it.
Some people it's that way, and then some people it can also be very preachy too. In the sense of like what you always hear about new converts to AA or whatever, where or new vegans, where they won't stop preaching, and I think that can be equally. It's probably inevitable to go through a phase of that. There's probably something like the different phases of grief in a way that you kind of have to walk through and spend at least a little time in each phase. But I think the sooner you can sort of come out the far end and be a little more just kind of wise, I guess, for lack of a better term, because one thing to keep in mind about an effective guerrilla fighter is that he chooses his battles, and he doesn't waste his resources in battles that are kind of useless. And I think the sooner someone can kind of figure that out in terms of personal interactions, because I've got friends and family members who believe vastly different things than I do, and, I just don't bring certain things up with them and kind of, talk about small talk stuff. But I don't know, I think there's some wisdom that can come with time, but it can also be speeded up if you realize what you're doing. And one other thing I would suggest to people, and anyone who's listening who's like a recent convert or anything like that to anarchism, I would suggest trying to find something creative that you can channel your energies into, and that'll make you feel a lot better. I found that with my podcast, honestly. The amount of creativity and energy I've put into it has actually made me more mellow than when I started it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That was part of my recovery. It was starting this podcast originally, and then moving on, and also doing the Fiends. Like, I keep myself so busy now that I'm physically drained all the time.
Yeah.
So I can't be as angry. Between that and the kids and my business, I can't be as angry as I was anymore. I don't have the energy for it. I mean, I still have my moments. It was because you were saying before about how you went, like, some people aren't that way and they kind of go through that anger stage. I don't really have that excuse. I was kind of always considered a dick before that. Long before that, people thought I was an asshole. So, it just got exacerbated for me. But I look at it now and I'm like, all right, well, that was a waste. So I could do better. I still have my moments though, because it was always there. But it's definitely, the more you can drain yourself, and especially with doing like with the podcast and the radio shows and stuff. Not only am I draining myself physically, but I'm also like, I get to have that mental stimulation in the areas I want to. Like, I get to talk to my friends. I get to talk to I get to meet and talk to people like you, and actually have conversations that I wouldn't get to have in my normal life. So like, it's even better. It's like, not only am I physically drained, but I'm actually like contented, where I'm not just dealing with these people who don't want to talk about these issues, and I have to avoid certain subjects, which actually just frustrates me more, because it's like, I need to get this stuff out. So having these outlets has been wonderful for me.
Yeah, it's kind of cathartic to be able to fully express yourself to people who actually are open to what you're saying. And I mean, I've definitely found that I feel less of a need to try and do unsolicited preaching to others in kind of my daily personal life, because I have this outlet where I can really say what I really want to say, and then I get it out there, and then I feel better about everything. And so I would urge anyone who's dealing with that sort of stuff to, whatever it is that you're into, whether it's writing fiction or doing art or podcast or anything you can do that's kind of, you have a knack for, that's creative, that you can put some of this energy and some of this thought into, it's going to make you a better person, I think. Honestly, it's therapeutic.
Oh yeah, I would have to, like I said, I'm living proof right now. Even the harshest critics throughout my entire life can't honestly look at me anymore and say you're still as angry as you always were. It's like, no, I'm still angry. I can still be a real asshole, but no, I am definitely calmer.
Yeah,
and it's not.
Yeah,
and
it's
it's
something
not
productive to do with it.
Yeah, because it's definitely not mellowing with age. I'm about to hit 40, but most of the time I don't feel that. Like, I still feel a lot younger than that, so I don't think it's like age catching up with me either. It's just like, no, I actually have found that outlet. It's funny. I mean, like, I know I had, but I don't think I really actually fully formulated that idea until you started talking about that. So yeah, thank you very much for that, actually. Like, that kind of clarifies things for me. Why now I really do have the explanation as to why I have been able to change so much. See, look at that. Anarchism heals, man.
Yeah. I mean, not the bomb throwing ANCOM, kind, but yeah.
No, man.
Our kind.
Exactly. The people, as long as if they're anarchist and voluntarist, it's almost impossible to be a real. I mean, you can try to be an asshole, but it's not going to last very long. People are going to get sick of you pretty quickly. So you kind of have to be at least a little bit mellower, although I'm probably at the high end of that threshold.
Yeah.
But that's
it takes all types.
Yeah, exactly.
Did we lose Dave?
I think we did. Look at that.
Well, random related to something we were talking a while ago, recommendations to anyone listening. Look up 2 books by an historian named Lewis Perry, Lewisperry. And he's one of the few, serious academic historians. I don't even know if he's still alive or not. These are books that were published in, the 60s and 70s. But Lewis Perry is one of the few serious academic historians I've run into who gives anarchism a fair shake as far as, a tradition of thought and everything. And Radical Abolitionism, Anarchy and the Government of God in Anti-Slavery Thought is one that I read for my presentation at the Midwest Peace and Liberty Fest, and I think I even quoted from it at one point in there. And then another one I'm excited, I just got in the mail, battered old copy from 40 or 50 years ago of a book called Patterns of Anarchy, a collection of writings on the anarchist tradition, edited by Lewis Perry and some other guy. And I haven't started reading it yet because I just got it in the mail yesterday. But it looks like it's going to be awesome just looking at the table of contents. It's a greatest hits album of kind of old school anarchism.
Wow, I gotta see if I can try to track down a copy of that. That sounds really good. I think I would like to read that as well. And
yeah, and these are books you can find frequently on Amazon for $5 and that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I'm not opposed to spending even a little more money on stuff that I think will be that valuable, because even though I finally got into I resisted getting into the technical age as far as books for quite a while. I refused to get a Kindle or anything like that. I was just like, no, I like my books, leave me alone. And then finally, a couple of years back, my ex bought me one, and I was like, fine, I'll try it, and I liked it after a little while. I'm like, all right, fine. I understand it's useful, but I still like to collect books, and especially for my kids. There's certain books I've been trying to collect, actual physical copies of, that I'm trying to preserve as well. Just, because, every once in a while things dance a little too closely to 1984 that I don't put the possibility of, government mandated book burnings actually taking place at some point in the next few 10 whatever years. It's never out of the realm of possibility as far as I'm concerned with these people. So I've been trying to keep stuff like that, like this, books like this that are harder to find now, and even in a couple of years, just because of maybe market forces, they may disappear anyway. So it's always, I think I definitely want to check these out. I'm going to check these out. Other people should too, definitely. And I'm almost positive you did quote from that in the talk, because like I said, I just finally listened to it today.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the things I was reading in the last few months or whatever that kind of gave me a lot of what I had in that presentation. And I gotta say, the market for old academic history and philosophy and political sciencey books and whatever seems to be really, really bizarre, because as someone who buys all these old beat-up academic books all the time, sometimes, most of the time, these books are very cheap. Even in good shape, they're $3, $2, whatever. And all of a sudden, there will be one academic history book, one obscure book, that you can't find a used copy anywhere for less than $200. And it just seems to be I don't know, arbitrary, I guess. Somebody gets it in their head that, like, oh, this is, the last 2 copies of this obscure history book published in the 70s by, Oxford Press or whoever. So, yeah, I'm just going to, throw it on Amazon for $150, and if it takes 20 years to sell, it takes 20 years to sell. I don't get it. I don't get it. But it's been annoying because sometimes there's books that I really want to get that you can't find for less than $150.
Well, isn't that the case? I thought I remember hearing a couple of different times that just the academic, or you're referring to like academic books, stuff like that. Aren't they normally like priced really high to begin with, even when they're new? Isn't that part of the reason that it's kind of cost prohibitive for like the average person to normally buy them?
Well, no, except for the case of like textbooks.
Oh, okay.
Like that's textbooks tend to be wildly overpriced. And it's because textbooks are a racket. The professor or the entire college, in the case of some colleges, they just decide, okay, these books are required for this course. And so you have the same economics as like why the airport charges way more for candy than the gas station down the road does for the same candy, or why the movie theater charges you, $8 for a soda, and if you go to Circle K, you can get the same giant big gulp soda for $1.
Yeah.
It's the whole captive audience sort of a thing. So, yeah, anything that's like a textbook tends to be wildly overpriced, but anything that's just like a monograph where, some historian wrote a 200-page book about some topic or whatever, those are usually pretty reasonable. Those are usually, $20-25 brand new as hardcovers, and, not any more expensive than like a hardcover history book you'd buy at Barnes & Noble, written by an illustrious historian like Doris Kearns Goodwin.
Oh, one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, she's great. I've actually considered possibly at some point doing an episode just kind of taking apart, the problems with her and her work and how screwed up it is.
Oh, yes, one of your DHP villains.
Yeah, probably. I mean, she's such a bootlicker for some of like the worst politicians of modern times. I mean, she's like a complete worshiper of Lyndon Johnson of all people. What a monster!
Yeah. He's a swell guy.
Yeah. I mean, constantly whipping at his Johnson, right? I mean, I don't know how many of those stories you've heard, but it's some pretty wild stuff.
I don't think I've heard stuff down that route. I just know what he did. I mean, in his time there, and the fact, and there's like, there seems to be plenty of, well, more than evidence that he was just a flat-out racist on top of everything else.
Yeah, I think he was a flat-out psychopath.
Oh, wow.
When you look at all the different pieces of evidence and, just like napalming Vietnam and everything.
Yeah,
and,
well, that.
But then these wild stories have come out where supposedly, like, he banged more random women in the White House than Kennedy did.
Whoa.
Yeah, exactly. But everybody's heard of Kennedy's famous, philandering. But various people have said that they have alleged that Lyndon Johnson may have like outdone John Kennedy in that regard, as far as like going to town with his secretaries and whatnot. And there are lots of stories about apparently he liked to whip out his Johnson in various contexts. Stories of him peeing on the White House grounds, just like there goes the president peeing in the bushes again. That he would actually show his junk to people. Supposedly he once whipped out his dong and said something like, "Is that not the biggest one you've ever seen?" to like, a congressman or something. I mean, it's just wild. These things, they're like straight out of, I don't know, House of Cards wouldn't even do something that outlandish,
Yeah, if I've ever heard any of those stories, I definitely don't remember them because, like, Johnson, I never studied. Well, I definitely didn't study his Johnson, but Johnson in general, yeah. I didn't study him like extensively. Like, I got more into like some of the other periods of history and stuff. I just looked at what he did on the the politically, like, and what he was doing in his time, and I was like, yeah, he's a horrible human being just on that alone. But that's insane.
Right? Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's all these bizarre stories about his personal life that have come out over the years. He would deliberately make people uncomfortable as a way of pressuring them and bullying them into agreeing to something he wanted to do. So, like, he would invite over a bunch of senators to talk about some bill, and when they came over to talk to him, they would find him sitting on the john taking a dump with the door open. And imagine this, you're a U.S. senator coming in to talk to the president about some bill, and there's the president dropping a deuce, and, like, you've got to have a conversation with him while he's doing his business. You know, I mean, these are the types of people that we have in charge of us. You know, they're not these wise statesmen and these people on a pedestal like we're led to believe. They're a bunch of nuts. You know, they're a bunch of whack jobs. They're not only are they not better than us regular folks, they're worse in most cases.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm like flabbergasted. I never, of all the presidents, like, he's like, for me, like, I'm like picturing his face right now, and I'm like, who would have wanted, like, I don't ever thought he was an attractive man, like, so he doesn't seem the part. So that's just, I mean, I'm all for people having a good time, but yeah, that level of psychopathy is probably, psychopathy. Yeah, that's pretty much probably, accurate.
Yeah.
That's a whole new level of normal sociopathic behavior by a president or anybody who gets in charge of any position of power where they can exacerbate some of their own traits because they have, they feel that they're entitled or whatever, that, that now that there's a position that they can do this, they can definitely take advantage of these things. But that's a whole new level.
Yeah, I mean, there's that study that I've referenced on my show before that a lot of people might have heard of, where they showed that power has the same effect physiologically on a human being as does cocaine, in terms of the rush, the feeling of inflated, ego and self-esteem, and the high, and also needing an ever bigger dose to get the same result, and that it's addictive, and that it, makes you more reckless and impulsive. I mean, this is the science. So if you take someone that already has some serious personality disorders, and then you give them this ridiculous amount of power that a modern U.S. president has, I mean, it's a recipe for insane stuff, which, looking at our two illustrious candidates this go around, is, I mean, you gotta wonder, like, which one of them is the more crazy, Oh,
well, yeah, I try so hard not to pay attention, but it's obviously kind of hard to ignore those two. And,
yeah,
because I know their history to begin with, it's like I'm well aware who they both are for a very long time before I gave up. So it's just like, and every time I check in, it doesn't seem like either of them has gotten any saner. So,
yeah,
and it does seem the closer it gets to November, which I have things to do before then, but and overall I would just like it to be past November, just so we wouldn't have I don't have to deal with this anymore. Because I've said it before, I really don't think it matters which one actually wins. Because I don't think it's predestined. I don't think it's predetermined in the way some people do. I just think that whoever actually makes it to that point, the people that are in charge don't care. They're like, yeah, we can work with either one of these people. So it doesn't matter who wins. The overall agenda will remain the same.
Yeah. There is such a thing as a deep state and a permanent government and that sort of thing. I mean, it may not be quite as organized and as much, pageantry as some of the lizard people crowd thinks it is. But on the other hand, I mean, there is a kernel of truth in the notion that there is a deep state, there is a permanent state that kind of just keeps going on its path regardless of elections. And I gotta say, I'm someone who gave up voting years and years ago, and who doesn't do the whole lesser of two evils trap anymore, and doesn't do that nonsense. But I've got to say that if I was someone who still was interested in lesser of two evils, this election in particular is like the hardest time to figure out the lesser of two evils ever in my lifetime that I can think of. I mean, it's really, really getting tough to pick the lesser of two evils if you want to play that game.
Oh, well, exactly, without a doubt. That's part of the reason another reason I've said I don't think it matters, because I think they're both equally dangerous in that position. and they're even if half of their rhetoric is true, which normally at best that's what you get at the stuff that they want to do is horrible. The stuff that they openly want to do is horrible. The stuff they want to do behind the scenes is a whole nother story. But it's I don't think I could pick between the two of them. I mean, I know there's I don't know any anarchists that support Clinton, but there are a number of so-called anarchists that are all about Trump, are thinking that it's the least worst we can do. It's like no, he'll be just as bad. You wait, you see.
Yeah, there's that whole thing going on now that's kind of disturbing about some self-professed anarchists and libertarians and whatever supporting Trump, and some not only just supporting Trump as, in their mind, lesser of two evils, but then, the ones that are actually like shading off into this whole new right thing that's a bit disturbing to me, at least.
Oh, the alt-right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's it, the alt-right, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a particularly big fan of... I mean... from what I've gathered from the stuff I've read and listened to from people on that in that camp, some of their stuff obviously makes sense. There's other aspects of it that I'm just like, no, not for me. I'm not into this. You're essentially nationalists. That's what you are. You're not. You claim to go to anarchism. Now you've somehow reverted back to being nationalist. Like that's really bizarre. But okay.
Yeah, and some of them, not all of them, because there's obviously a wide spectrum in that group, but some of them are like shading off into flat out fascists in some cases. I mean, like, no joke. Unapologetic.
Yeah, no, I've seen that as well, where they just boggles the mind, because how do you... Unless, I don't know, there have been people in the past that usually haven't gotten that far. I've always used Austin Peterson as my example, who claimed he went ANCAP and then went back when he realized it wasn't feasible. I'm like, no, that's not how this works, man. You you obviously didn't understand the principles fully, because if you did, there's really no going back from this, unless something else manages to come along that actually, I don't know, it's broken down to like the simplest terms, and you're not really... I don't think you got it to begin with. So unless these people didn't really get it to begin with, and it's just that residual statism, whatever, wherever they were prior to what they thought was their transformation, I don't know. Like I said, to me it doesn't make sense. I'm not saying it can't happen. It just doesn't make sense to me. It does not compute.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, there was a recent episode of School Sucks. I think it was... not the most recent episode, but maybe the one before that, where Brett had on Jeffrey Tucker.
Oh, yeah.
And Jeffrey Tucker was talking about his take on the new right, and I thought it was very good, his critique of the alt-right, excuse me, I keep saying new right, alt-right. And he wrote an article critical of them. I've not read it, but they mentioned it on the show. And I think the title was something along the lines of, "The enemy of my enemy is not my friend." Because some people in the libertarian movement are like, hey, look, these alt-right people are criticizing the left, so we should make an alliance with them. It's like, well, just because someone has an enemy in common with you doesn't always mean that they're your friend and they should be your ally and that they actually have interests and goals in common with you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, too, because most of the ones that I've come across are all... at least they claim to be like the most hardcore Rothbardians, because they also seem to pick up, at least again, they're just the ones I've encountered, they seem to pick up on even his most ludicrous arguments regarding children and stuff, which I've never ascribed to. When I found Rothbard, I was like, oh, this guy's brilliant. But when I came across that stuff, I was like, what?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started asking other people and be like, does everybody else agree with this? Because I don't know if I can get on board with this stuff. And everybody I talked to was like, no, that's not my thing either. I'm like, oh, okay, so it's not just me. Because I was like, what the heck is this? But they take it to this extreme. And it's funny, because if they really were that hardcore all about Rothbard, you think they would have paid attention to the fact that he tried all this. He tried going to the different groups because, hey, look at this. We have something in common. We can work together. And it more often than not burned him in the end because he finally had to say, this is ridiculous. I can't do this. It's not like he tried, and there was no getting through to these people past a certain point. So towards the end, he just gave up, and he's like, yeah, that might have been an effort, an exercise in futility. So to me, it just makes it even more funny that I'm like, your God made these same mistakes, so you want to follow exactly in his footsteps? Like that's what your goal is? I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they just sort of they pick up the parts of Rothbard that are not what we might consider like the most important parts.
Yeah.
The kind of essential parts. They kind of skip over that and fixate on some of the nuttier stuff.
Yeah, like I said, I can't explain it. I can only think that they weren't really there to begin with. All the way, they didn't make it all the way to begin with, and they just got sidetracked. I don't know, but I mean, I know the alt-right is bigger than that. It's not, the people that, just like within any other group, the ones that are getting the most attention are usually the very, very vocal minority. Or at least, maybe only like half of them. Like, because I've met a bunch of the more moderate ones who they don't openly talk about it with me. Some of the other ideas that I'm just kind of like, yeah, that's not my thing. They don't really go that far, but they still kind of consider themselves in that camp currently. And I'm just like, oh, okay, so you people exist too. So I guess it's becoming like a big tent thing, just like anything else, because it's not just anarchists. It's people, it's conservatives and neocons and whatever else. All these people coming, and there is a population of straight up, like hardcore white nationalists. So takes all kinds, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, obviously that's not all of them, but the fact that that's some of them is a little bit troubling.
Well, yeah, no, exactly.
I mean, I have no problem. I have no problem with people wanting to associate with whoever they want to voluntarily, but I don't want to be part of a movement that takes that sort of collectivism, because it's just another kind of collectivism,
Yeah, it is. Like, and like I said, that would actually go towards the idea that it's just they never got past certain point. They're hung up on their residual statism, which includes collectivism, whether people want to admit it or not. I love agitating the people on the right by calling them collectivists. It drives them batty. I'm like, but you are. I can show you how you are. I'm not a collectivist. Rah, rah, America. Why? Shut up. Leave. Okay. Yeah. How are you not a collectivist? All right. Anyway, before we get to going down that rabbit hole, I'm looking at the time. We should probably get wrapping up. And I guess we're not getting Dave back, so that was unfortunate. Dave got drone, but that's okay. You and I got to chat some more, so that was good. But before we get going, I want to thank you for giving us the time tonight. It's always good to talk to you, and this was a lot of fun. We definitely went in directions that I didn't think we were going to go, but I think I'm kind of happy we went there. I thought it worked. So, and also,
we just sort of let stuff wander where it wanted to wander, I guess.
Yes, exactly. It's good to do every once in a while. And obviously, before we go, I'll let you close up with anything you want to, and give plugs for anything and everything you would like to plug, sir.
Sure, yeah. The main website for my podcast is dangeroushistorypodcast.com. dangeroushistorypodcast.com. It's available any podcast venue, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, whatever. You can find it there, and I've got a Facebook page for the show, got a Twitter account for the show. On Twitter, I'm Dangerous History CJ. Couldn't fit Dangerous History Podcast in Twitter. But, yeah, that's where you can find me, and I've got 100 and something teen episodes done already on a wide variety of history subjects, from ancient times all the way to modern recent history. And by the way, just as a sneak preview, the one I'm in the middle of working on actually right now, and probably I'm going to record in the next couple of days, is on Operation Underworld, which is the U.S. government's teaming up with the Mafia, with La Cosa Nostra, during World War II, and continuing to work with them in various ways into the early decades of the Cold War. So doing a podcast touching on some of that stuff that I think is going to be pretty interesting.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to that. I know the name of that, and I remember reading a little bit about that, but that's another one of those things that just I haven't took the time to get into. So I know already I'm going to learn a lot, so I'm psyched.
Yeah, it's one of those many things where it's not a secret. It's been exposed for years and years and years, and yet almost nobody's really heard of it. Most people, you still walk up to them and go, during World War II, the Office of Naval Intelligence buddied up with Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano and made friends with the mafia for all these different projects, and people would think you were crazy. They'd think you're just as crazy as if you walked up and started telling them about lizard people.
Yep.
But this is something that's completely true, verified, been exposed for years. So, I'm going to try and put it together and tell it in an interesting way, hopefully.
Well, based on your prior content, I can rest assured that it will definitely be interesting, at least to me. But I encourage everybody else to check that out too. That's that's definitely going to be a good one. And I think you're up to 116 because I fell behind for a little while. But I like I said, I just listened to I went backwards too after I fell behind, and I listened to the talk today, and now I'm finally catching up. I think the only one I missed was the one you did on the Priscillian Club a couple of weeks back. So
yeah, that was a tough one to do because there's just not that much information out there on them. I tried to kind of scrape together what I could and tried to make it into a coherent presentation.
Well, so far I'm only like 10 minutes in. So far you're doing good. I approve.
Okay.
But yeah, so I will also put all of CJ's links in the show notes, and I obviously, again, I encourage anybody who hasn't checked out his stuff to definitely at least give it a listen because I mean, I found you. I think 20 or 30 episodes in. I started, and then I went back and listened to most of the ones I'd missed. But I haven't missed this. I haven't missed one, like I said, except the ones I fell behind on. But I'll catch up by the end of the next couple of days. I haven't missed one since episode 28, somewhere around there. So it's great quality stuff. I highly encourage people to check it out, and if you like it, obviously he's got a bunch of ways to kick a little money his way because his services, yes, his services are definitely needed because as we talked about earlier, there's some decent historians out there. Like I said, I'm a personal fan of Dan Carlin and also Daniele Bilelli's new podcast as well, but CJ takes it from a perspective that people like quote unquote us don't get a lot of out there, if anything at all. So other than like books on it, but here you have somebody who actually gives you a story and brings it to you and brings it where you don't have to go searching for it. And it's like you said earlier, you found a black hole in the market, and you're right now you're currently filling it quite beautifully. So we'll let you have your monopoly.
I'm the large fish in the small pond.
Oh, that just might have to be the show title for tonight. But
there you go.
So like I said, I'll put all the links in the show notes. Definitely go check him out. Unfortunately, Dave got droned. Hopefully he'll make it back for next week. We did get a message from Danilo earlier, who I think he may be bowing out permanently. So my jokes about him having to work his way back may have actually gotten to him. I'm not sure. We'll have to figure that out. But at the very least, I'll be back next week. So we'll see what happens then. But this has been the Seeds of Liberty podcast. All of our information can be found at the seedsoflibertypodcast.com. And one last thing before we go, I did want to give a shout out to one other podcast that I've become a huge fan of very quickly, and I think he's doing excellent work right now, is Libertarians on Fire with Rick Rivers and a rotating set of guest hosts, including one of my fellow Freedom Fiends, Lisa DeLascio, and he's putting out quality content every week. And his audio is spectacular. I am jealous.
Yeah. I'll second that recommendation. It's a good show, and people should start listening to it now and subscribe to it now. That way, when the episode that I'm going to be on in a few weeks comes out, it'll pop up automatically in your podcast feed.
I didn't hear about that. You're going to be on? Awesome. I look forward to that because I like Rick a lot, and I love what he's doing, and so that should be great too. So yes, definitely go check out Rick's show at Libertarians on Fire. It can be found at all the same places that our show can be, and pretty much all the places CJ's can be. And once again, this has been the Seeds of Liberty podcast. It's been great talking to you, CJ.
Thanks for having me on. Good talking to you, and good talking to Dave while he was here.
Yeah, I'll have to go track him down. probably another storm in Bama. It happens, but all right. So we will catch you next time, folks. Peace.
Enemies is just enables you to see it too. Menial, recently reading into the thesis here, mirroring the people who completely fail to see it though. Seeing is believing, yes, the reason is appealing most. Reading enemies is just enables you to see it too.
Now that you put it that way, I have the answer to that question. It's projection. That's what it is. It's not a cop-out to call us utopians. They're actually projecting their own self-hatred onto us.
Are you sick of government lackeys who say you didn't build that? Are you tired of elitists who think you need a government permission slip for everything? Everything you do is an A to B conversation, and the government should see their way out of it. Create true free markets by adopting the BIPCOT No Government License. The BIPCOT No Gov license allows use or modification of any product, service, or software except by governments or government agents. Go to bipcot.org. That's Bravo, India, Papa, Charlie, Oscar, Tango.org.